Brian, you want to get us started? Oh, you're on mute.
Probably better for all of you that I am on mute. I'm Brian Beveridge, the co-director of the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. Welcome, everyone. Our organization, for those who don't know, is also represents the co-leads, or we would call the co-chairs of the committee, in partnership with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District staff. I'll pass it to Nicole.
Welcome to our first steering committee meeting of 2023. Definitely looking forward to this meeting and everyone's input and participation, and just really excited about what 2023 will look like, especially as we're solidly moving into WOCAP implementation phase.
Great. And we're going to have just a brief introduction by Brian of just an announcement really of the new APCO.
Do you want to share your screen?
I think it'd be better. I think it'd be better if Air District staff introduce their new boss. Somebody want to do that?
Hi, I can.
Sure.
Alicia Parker with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And yes, we have a new executive officer, also known as the Air Pollution Control Officer, Dr. Philip Fine. And he, as you can see on the screen, he has, a fairly detailed resume with experience at the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and also with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, where he was appointed by President Biden to lead the Office of Executive Justice, of Environmental Justice. And just to note on what the executive officer functions are, the executive officer is responsible for all aspects of the air district. So that includes policy and rule development, it includes enforcement and permitting, technology, planning, grant allocation, administration, and engagement with communities that are disproportionately impacted by air pollution. So we're really excited to have his experience, and I hear he has a real passion for this work and for the program of AB 617. So more to come in the future about that.
Great. And now that I believe everybody is here, we're just going to take a roll. We're just starting this month, but we're going to take a roll at the beginning of each meeting for the steering committee members. So is Bill Abudi here?
I just let him in, so he's here, but I don't think
Okay, so
he's
Bill is
connected to
here.
audio yet. Yeah.
Laura Ariola?
Present, and here with my colleagues from the port.
Great. Brent Bucknam? Not present. I believe Reverend Carroll is on a plane, so he will not be joining us. Bridget Cook? Kevin Cruson?
Hello, everybody. I'm here.
Great. Glad to have you. Richard Groh, I believe it's going to be no. Kalila Haynes?
Hi, good evening. I'm here.
Matt Heft?
He'll be a little late, Randolph.
Sony Johnson? Kate Lefkowitz? Rita Look?
Hi, I'm here.
Steve Lowe? Alverdia Owens.
I am here.
We know Miss Alverdia is here. Colin Pete. Fern. Don't want to mess up your name.
Maria is here serving as the alternate.
Okay.
And Randolph Selena is filling in for Colin. They
Okay.
they share that seat.
Great. And Maria's here. And David Woolley.
Hi, everybody.
Awesome. All right, now we have a follow-up from the previous meeting. Brian and Miss Margaret.
I don't have notes on previous business unless you've got them in front of us.
No, we're just jumping right into your,
Oh, we're writing.
Sustainable port.
Okay, so we're jumping into
Yeah.
my thing. Okay. I'm just, so maybe have we explained, or will we explain later, the structure of meetings? Or are we just going to launch it on people as a surprise?
we're gonna launch it.
Okay, that's good. All right. We are going to do a roll call and then reminders of previous work. And so we're developing a new structure that we hope is more helpful to the committee to have continuity to the dialogue. So, this isn't the order I expected it, but I'll dive in. So one of the things that's happening in Washington, you may have read about this, the Biden administration has, a whole bunch of big buckets of money. They have the infrastructure money that they're putting out. I think it's 800 billion or something, and there's some other buckets. And they established a policy called Justice 40. And that policy says that 40%, as you can read here, 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution. So that says that whether they give our community the money directly or they give it to some other government agency that wants to do something around our community, 40% of those funds have to create value for our community. This is my interpretation. So if you belong to an organization and a lot of people are calling you up and sending you emails saying, hey, there's a whole bunch of money available. Do you want to talk about a partnership? This is why. The federal government has said that you've got to have community benefit. And the only way you're going to figure out what that is if you have community partners. So we fought for, all of us have fought for decades to get recognized that community is important in investment and spending of federal dollars and state dollars. Justice 40 kind of says that's what this is about. To me, this is almost as important as the Clinton administration executive order for environmental justice. It aligns pretty well. So every department, every agency has to work this into their funding plans. There's a ton of money and very little short time. The administration has told some agencies, I think EPA has been told, you have $27 billion and you got to spend it in the next 18 months. They don't know how to do that. So there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of levels at which communities can be involved in this process of determining how the federal government gets this money out the door and onto our streets and into real things like infrastructure, not just to hold a bunch more meetings. You can't spend $27 billion on meetings. We have to think of things to do with it that will improve our communities. And this is a big opportunity for tens of millions of dollars to come to all of our communities. And as it says in the bottom, there are many opportunities that we haven't really thought about because they're so expensive. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Next slide. So an exciting thing that's happened in our work with the port, and you may know that over the years we have struggled a lot with the port, And the port, past administrations and have not always been that friendly or cooperative. There was a lot of resistance to reaching across the freeway or off port property. Well, we have a port administration now that says they actually want to go beyond their boundaries. And WOCAP has begun sort of an outgrowth of our work in the Sustainable Ports Collaborative we created 1.5 years ago to try to help the port see which ways to go that would help them be sustainable and to accelerate their move to electrification or zero emission freight. One of the things that's come out of that is a desire for on the part of the port for us in the community to support their grant writing to the federal government and the state for things they're trying to do, like electrification upgrades and microgrids and solar energy, and as well as other general port terminal improvements. And we've said that's good and we like those things, but we have proposed that the port work with us on trying to get some of this federal money too for improvements that could be done in the community, because we don't really have the capacity to write these giant federal grants. And the port as an institution has that kind of capacity. And the executive director, Danny Wan, has said, look, we should do this. Let's see if we can figure out how to do it. It's never been done before. We've never quite had this relationship with the port, but they are very willing. So we're in the middle of trying to develop a grant now. We're thinking in the future there will be more grants. There will be more things we can do, particularly things where the port's interests and ours coincide. Energy is one of those. Stormwater. There are a variety of other things where we have common needs. And our needs are interwoven. So we're talking to the port now. We've had several meetings that have grown out of other meetings. And we're looking for the right thing. There's something called the government to government grant that's under EPA. And that sounds like it wouldn't include us, but under Justice 40, the community's got to be at the table in determining the best value of these grants. So what we're working on right now is to figure out what's a good grant. This can be up to $1 million. It has a collaborative component where communities and stakeholders work together to solve a difficult problem, and perhaps eventually, maybe do something right now, but also create a model or a scope for a grant that would then be submitted to the federal government under what is it called, the EIR or the RIA or whatever it is, the infrastructure money, that might bring like tens of millions of dollars for a big infrastructure project that could come to our community. So here inside our WOCAP offices, we've been thinking about some of the big things that haven't received money, that have just been sitting there, wishful thinking mostly, that we might work on. 4 of them are represented here. Let's go back one. So 4 of them here. Residential decarbonization. The steering committee has heard 2 or 3 presentations on how we can decarbonize residential homes. That means get rid of their gas appliances, but make them still able to afford their energy, right? It's very important. We don't really know. How do we get into people's homes? How do we educate them on the need? How do we get them upgrades? How does all that work? That will take a collaborative effort of different stakeholders bringing different things to the table. Sea level rise is incredibly important to us all. There's been a lot of research, there hasn't been a lot of concrete discussion about how should we approach it. We were lucky in the last storms. I mean, in my neighborhood, I think over along Wood Street, there were big floods. My neighborhood, we kind of got past it after the first first big storm, and the storm drain things got cleaned and the water kept going away. But West Oakland is almost in a bowl now behind the port and parts of the city and other things, other infrastructure that's being raised up, and so we're lower than everything around us now. And so how are we going to address this? This will require the city and the state and the region all involved. EBMUD, our stormwater flows under the port, so they have a vested interest in how this all happens. So potential really interesting and powerful partnership there that might bring tens of millions of dollars for stormwater management to our community. There is the port's working on a lot of electrical stuff. They know a lot about it. The community, we take it for granted. We walk down our streets, there's like 40 wires over our head. A tree blows over, they all come down, the power goes out. We haven't had a chance to really talk about electrical infrastructure. Miss Margie used to talk a lot about why don't we have underground power lines? It's actually safer all around, but it costs tens of millions of dollars to do it. We need PG&E and East Bay Community Energy and other folks at the table to figure that one out. And then there's community energy resilience, solar power, batteries, resilient centers, resilient hubs, keeping certain primary assets in the community going during disasters, and also building greater overall energy equity and resilience. So these are some of the things we're thinking about. We might co-author a grant with the port. And we don't really have an exercise about it here tonight, but certainly if you have thoughts on relevant projects that would make sense for us to
Can you go to the next slide, Randolph?
let's go to the next slide.
No, no, that's
Went the wrong direction. Grant writing. Here we go.
Yeah.
Is this it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea here is Tom Smith has a good one. Somebody else had an idea for grants that don't require government, but this is a government grant program. So we should take advantage of it, I think, or not write a grant. So government to government grant. It's intended to do something specific. You can get the money and do a small project. We could buy some solar panels and a battery and put them somewhere. But it's also intended to look at big issues that require a fairly intensive collaborative process and come up with a proposal for larger infrastructure grants in the next 12 months, because they want to get this going. They want to get this money out the door. So this would be a fairly fast process of identifying something that's doable and then asking the feds for the money. Mm-hmm. We invite you guys to think about how you'd like to be involved in this.
Randolph, can you go to the next slide?
And
can we, and we're going to wrap.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So pick one. So these are some of the things that Beth pulled from our strategies. Some things that we might be able to work on together. Some things, but we might want to do something other. This particular project is not rooted to our strategies because it may go outside of air quality. And that's something we need to talk about as a community and make some choices about. So we invite you to send us ideas. You can send thoughts to, you can put them in the chat and we'll record them. You can also send things to Nicole, and she can put her, if you don't already have it, she can put her email address in the chat. We want to get folks' ideas because this is a quick turnaround. And the grant is due April 10th. So, the port wants to help us, but that means we got to pick something and go after it, right? So that's the end of my.
Great. Thanks, And we'll get you Nicole's email in the chat, and then we're gonna move
You put it there already.
yeah, to Oakland General Plan update.
Okay. Miss Margaret, do you want me to go through, or did you want to give these? Not. Okay, well, I'll start and then Miss
Let's
Margaret
have
can jump
Beth
in.
start. Yes,
Okay.
please.
So just an announcement, the housing element was adopted by the city council and recently certified by the state. So Oakland's going to be able to maintain state funding and be in good standing. In the next month or so, the city council will be considering amendments put forward by Deeply Rooted and other community groups. So, you know, they still might make some minor additions, but for now, you know, Oakland has a new housing element and it's much improved. Next slide. It was part of that housing element as required by the new state regulations. They had to put in some preliminary zoning proposals. So it shows some of the proposed zoning changes to mostly residential things with a big affordable housing overlay. So I can put that link in the chat just if folks are interested. Next slide. And another big piece is that the industrial land study is happening now, and they're going to be releasing a draft. I couldn't get the city to give me an exact date, but I think sometime in the spring. And this study will inform the environmental justice, land use, and other elements of the general plan. It originally was called an industrial lands policy. Now they're calling it a study. So I don't know what the backstory is on that, but we will get lots of information about industrial land soon. Next slide. Oh, thank you, Randolph. And then this is the timeline, and I think Kalila's on here too. So Kalila, please jump in if there's things I'm missing, but the public draft of the environmental justice element will be released March 27th, and that'll open up the 90-day public comment period, which will go until June 23rd. This is our chance to review and provide feedback to the city. They'll take those comments from the public, make revisions, and then bring that updated element to adoption hearings, and the commissions and council will kind of adopt the safety and EJ, environmental justice element, at the same time. And then after that, that's when the work really starts, because then we'll have to kind of be tracking things for implementation and accountability. So during this March 27th through June 23rd period is when we're going to have to pull all of you together in meetings outside of the steering committee and during to kind of brainstorm what we want to see in there. And I see Miss Margaret's hand raised, so great, Miss Margaret. I think that was my last slide anyway.
Yes. Miss Margaret? You're on mute.
As we move forward, the steering committee needs to strategize how they're going to be engaged once again in the Oakland General Plan. Right as of right now is that we don't know if the steering committee sees that as one of the strategies about West Oakland as part of the implementation planning that we're going to discuss. So I see that has to be much clearer, precise, and with clarification of the steering committee of your role in this general plan. So I'm in hopes through this our conversation tonight and discussion about implementation. How do we the steering committee be more including into this general plan? Because it is still same old. If we do not bring new innovations to the city about how these plans are supposed to be more directed to the needs of those who are most vulnerable or impacted. And also how the language of these documents are being structured to be more including of the community. Because a lot of this language and structuring has been so technical, and it's been my business to make them go back and try and be more translating to the everyday people of what are you trying to do? Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. Any additional thoughts, Beth?
Well, I think Alicia in her section will bring up some ways to get involved, but I think I'm already starting a list for items to include in a follow-up email to you all. And I think one of them will be kind of getting our implementation team up and running again, and figuring out how frequently folks are interested in meeting, and we can kind of walk through the element together piece by piece, you know, maybe every other week, roll up our sleeves and look at things. So so we'll send out an email tomorrow to get volunteers for that.
Right.
Let me add something to this. Once again, I'm gonna say this, and I hope the city staff that's here for the Oakland General Plan, they have to restructure their documents in such a way that they're not overly burdened technically to the community. And right now, those documents that they're sending out do not really support community engagement, because you can't, how can you engage and you don't understand what the document's supposed to mean? So we need a process, city, whereas that you know how to be delivering a communication that makes sense to those community members who are engaging in the Oakland General Plan.
Great, thanks. And if we don't have any questions or comments from the steering committee members or others on this call, we'll move forward. Steering committee members? No? All right, thank you. So we're going to move to the annual calendar. There's a draft of the annual calendar. Alicia.
Okay, great. Thank you, Randolph. Okay, so I would like to talk a little bit about the calendar for 2023, and I think you know, Randolph is leading the meeting, and you may notice a few changes, including the roll call and kind of a report back from the previous meeting. And now we are, you know, kind of another slight change or kind of, you know, element of the work plan for 2023 is, you know, kind of standardizing the content for the steering committee meetings. And so I have a handful of slides that talk about the annual calendar, the intent behind the calendar. And so in this first slide, we present the year at a glance. And then I have a couple of slides that get into a little bit more detail about the types of meetings. And again, we're trying to standardize the steering committee process a little bit more, leaving room for flexibility to better support implementation of WOCAP strategies. And so you'll see that we have several types of meetings. We have strategy progress meetings that's happening tonight in March. It's also happening in August. I'll talk about what those are in a moment. We have an enforcement review meeting that's happening next month, and it's also happening in September. We have kind of a policy and project update placeholder meetings, and we can talk about the types of projects and policies that you would like to have an update on and be involved in. And that's happening in May and October. And then we have a reflection opportunity, which would happen in June. And that's also part of the plan. And then we have the town hall, which would happen in November, and kind of celebrate the accomplishments and maybe highlight some of the upcoming work, and then a year-end progress report, and that's sort of related to what we report to CARB, to the California Air Resources Board. And so in the next few slides, I have a little bit more detail. So Randolph, if you could advance the slide. Thank you. Okay, so as you are familiar, we have, you know, the West Oakland Community Action Plan is a collection of strategies, right, related to improving air quality. And what we propose to do in the strategy tracking meetings is to take take those strategies, we've assigned them during the plan preparation process to various partner agencies for implementation, including the Air District, including City of Oakland, including Port of Oakland, including Alameda County Public Health. And so periodically we want to get updates from our partner agencies so that we can kind of make them public, so that our community, our stakeholders, and our steering committee members can review the strategies and become familiar with them and with the progresses on them in an attempt to figure out where we think our advocacy efforts would be helpful. Again, to keep a closer pulse on the work of implementation. And so that would be, again, happening twice a year, where we would ask for these updates. And so this is also kind of a heads up to our agency partners that are here tonight. Thank you for the updates that you did provide, and just kind of, again, that we would be asking for them again later in the year. And and I also wanted to just say that we do have the link to the strategy tracker, and I don't know if anyone wants to, if one of the consultants could put the link. Yeah, thanks, Jess. To the strategy tracker, but again, really encourage you to check out that strategy. You, the steering committee members of the public. It's a very user-friendly way to look at the progress on the strategies. And I don't know, was there a poll here, Randolph, or did we decide not to do that?
No, we can do a poll.
Okay, good. So we have it's a poll, and it's meant to be very unchallenging, but just a little bit of a prompt for you. So can you please launch it? Actually, no, let's save that poll. Thanks. Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, great. All right, thanks, Randall. So we want to know from you, our steering committee members, again, because what we are trying to do is give a greater role to the steering committee in steering this work and the implementation work and where we place our advocacy efforts. And so want to know from you whether or not you're looking at the tracker. And so can you please answer the poll that is up on your screen now, if you look at your screen. It says, I routinely review this public strategy tracker, and the answer could be yes or no. So I'm going to answer now. And Randolph, should I go to the next slide while you're collecting those responses? Okay, great. Good. And so the next type of meeting is an enforcement report meeting. And so the idea here is that we recognize that enforcement is a critical component to ensuring emissions reductions and to improving air quality and public health in West Oakland. And we want to make sure that our health protective rules are enforced. And that is, it speaks to our agencies having greater accountability to the community, but also to encouraging the partnership that will be needed between community and our enforcement agencies to really make the gains that we're hoping to make. And so the way that we would do that is to ask our enforcement staff, agency staff, for the update. So whether that's, the complaints that have been filed, whether that's the violations that have been confirmed, whether that's sort of known hotspots or anecdotal information, that's what we will hope to bring you next month. Okay. And we're, at that meeting, we want to make sure that it's in a format that is very useful for you, community, to help us ground truth it based on your experience in the neighborhood. And next slide, great. Okay, so the policy and project deep dives are a way to help shape the advocacy work that affects the work that we're working on. And so the way that we're so throughout our planning meetings, we've identified some strategies that are sort of primed for community involvement, for stakeholder involvement. And so I can give you I have the bulleted list on the slide. I have a little bit of kind of detail on each of them. And then what we were hoping to do was kind of get a sense from you tonight about where your interest lies relative to these strategies. Okay. And so again, in the May, June, and potentially I think October meetings, this is where we can fill that information in. And as Beth said, this can definitely happen in between steering committee meetings as well. So the work on these types of projects and policy work. So the general plan, Kalila's here tonight. Hi, Kalila. The general plan is a blueprint for Oakland's future for the next 25 years. It includes an environmental justice element. And Miss Margaret was saying that, it's really prime for the community to be involved, and we really need our stakeholders, our steering committee to embrace, I would say, this particular project. In addition, so that's, the first part of it will be this environmental justice element. The housing element already was adopted. And then the next part will be a land use element. Well, we'll be looking at where does it make sense to put heavy industrial uses? What does the future of West Oakland community look like? Do we want to continue this mix of heavy industrial and residential? Is that going to change in the future? So it's a really important opportunity to weigh in on that discussion. The Prescott Greening Project is a green infrastructure project that is between 880 and the Prescott neighborhood that West Oakland EIP is working on. The building electrification project is the reduction or elimination of natural gas systems. So that could align with the Oakland building electrification roadmap work. The STEP grant is a grant that the Oakland Department of Transportation has received to do urban greening projects, bicycle resource hub, transit access improvements, and to implement the truck management plan, including uniform signage and sign installation for truck routes and truck parking. The Healthy Homes Initiative is an opportunity to identify locations for indoor air filtration in existing buildings. The Sustainable Port, let's see, is that the next one? Truck management, just a note there that there's an opportunity to kind of weigh in and think about where traffic calming measures should be, and where their problem locations are for trucks idling and trucks driving on residential streets. And then the Sustainable Port work is about electrical, and I know the port is here, and but the Sustainable Port work is about developing an electric power supply for maritime waterfront areas and to reduce barriers to adoption of zero emission trucks. And so I see that the poll for I don't see it anymore, but okay. Why don't we come back to that?
We'll do a couple of things. We'll get the results from the first polls. We're going to take any questions from the steering committee before we do the next poll, because the next poll is going to be based on these strategies right here. So the has everybody who is going to take the poll done so?
Okay, and so kind of back to the strategy tracker. It looks like about 3/4 of you have not looked at it, and so this is just a friendly reminder, friendly prompt to do so. Periodically check out that tracker. Make sure you're really familiar. You as a steering committee are familiar with the strategies of the West Oakland Community Action Plan. That's kind of your that's a part of your job. That's a part of your role here. And if you have any questions about the strategies, I mean, some of them are very, very technical. I'm here. We have consultants here. We have EIP, a West Oakland EIP here. We can all help, and you have each other. Okay, so certainly reach out to us.
Great.
Okay.
Do we have any questions before we go to the next poll? David, I know you had your hand up earlier. Do you still have a question?
I just wanted to ask where I can find the tracker. I can't find it on the website.
And
Mind if I
there,
jump in, to direct? So if you click, excuse me, if you click the link that's in the chat, wope.org/owning our air, that'll take you to the landing page for the strategies. And when you click, you can click on each of the different categories to view the embedded trackers for each category. So you'll see land use, health and living buffers, bike walk transit, and port and freight. So when you click on each of those, that'll give you a little overview, and then it'll break down all of the individual strategies underneath. And there's updates that are included within that.
Randolph, how hard would it be for you to pull up our website and just show it? It's pretty straightforward, but it may not look like a tracker to people.
I'm also happy to share my screen because I have it up if that's an option, whatever's easiest.
sure.
Okay, whoever can share, that would be great. Can Jess share her screen, or do you want to
Yep.
do it, Randolph?
Nope. She's
Should
doing
be
it.
able to,
Good.
She's
yeah.
doing
Your screen.
She's doing it
Good.
right now.
Great.
All right. So if you go to wope.org/owning our air, that'll redirect you to the sort of real URL. But that gives you this landing page here. And if you just scroll down, each of these sections will take you to a group of related strategies. So if I click on land use here, I see this little overview. And then down here, I can explore each of the strategies. And I can click on one of these cards if I want to view the full strategy description. It'll give me whatever latest update we have from the related lead agency. And these are updated in real time. So you should be able to explore all of these in depth.
And one thing it's important that we're sort of starting to focus on this year is you see there on the cards, if you will scroll back up, implementation started, it's a yellow. If nothing was happening, that would be in red probably. If it was complete, it would, or there you go. It's infeasible. Somebody thinks it's infeasible. Here's one that's complete. It's in green, right? There's one over here we're no longer pursuing. There are some that haven't had any action yet. And so one of the things we'd like all the steering committee members to do is start looking at these strategies and saying, hey, how come this thing's hasn't even been started? You know, it's like no activity. These are the places where the committee can begin to have some influence over how the strategies are being implemented. And if you say, what's wrong with this one? This one's really important to me. Then we have to stop and have a conversation about how we get resources to implement that strategy. That's why it's important that you look at these on some, not every day of your life, but at least consider this a tool for you to better understand how your air plan is being implemented and where you might want to bring your voice to encourage someone to bring resources to implement something you feel is important. This is something we want to get going this year. So the steering committee members are beginning to take a real active role in influencing the implementation of the strategies. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions before you to explain the different strategies that you're being pulled on? No?
Yeah, and I just put some of the kind of definitions of the strategies or a little description of the strategies in the chat. It's a little long, but yeah, so I think the idea here would be that you would pick your top three. And also, I think Beth can follow up around specific folks who are interested in particular projects. I think that's one of the things that we might need to, maybe we can just talk about now, but certainly steering committee members and members of the public, please, select the three, projects that you would like to hear about this year or be involved in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I can see the results of who added in what. So
We're going to show, I think Randolph can show that in a minute.
No, but it doesn't track like which respondent. So in terms of this
who
poll
said-
is not signing up for a committee because we don't have that, but we can use a
Get the
different.
general
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah, just
bulk
the
of interest,
general.
yeah. So
For example, the city had offered to come to our May meeting to do a deep dive on the general plan if people are interested in that. But if, you know, truck management or some other topics are feel more important or critical to address right away, then we want to be responsive to what you all want to hear about.
yeah. And for and additional clarity, we'll keep clarifying.
Yes.
This is not what I was talking about a second ago, Rich. These are active implementation projects. And if you're really interested in hearing this year about what's the progress on general plan or what's the progress on truck management, then you should pick those things, right? This is your top 3 interests. This is how you will influence your own agenda this year. The issue of what isn't being implemented at this time, we want to address that too, but we want you to address it by raising those issues in something we're going to call new business in our agendas. So you're saying, oh, I looked at all those things, and why isn't something happening on this particular strategy? Well, then we should have a conversation about it, and it can go on the agenda. These are project reports that you would be interested in hearing. So choose the top 3 that you'd like to hear, and we'll see how that influences the agenda setting for this year.
Great. And so some people are chiming in the chat. You can also add your comments or just kind of request for additional information on your participation in the sign-in sheet. So I put the sign-in sheet in again, and please by your name, just indicate there that you would like to be engaged in any of these strategies moving forward.
I'm copying and pasting people's interest from the chat into my notes though, so I don't want people to have to do things twice.
Excuse me, I have my hand up.
Miss Margaret.
I would like to make sure that the steering committee members understand going to this new phase about implementation. We need the individuals to step up to be the leaders in these implementation plans. If you are picking and choosing which one that you see the strategy is very concerning to you, I also need you to step up to take on that leadership and shaping, framing, and structuring how this should be moving forward. That is one of the critical pieces now that we need as a role and task of the steering committee members. It's not just about having just the information. How are you going to be the leader or have leadership on these particular things?
Great, thanks, Miss Margaret. Has everybody completed the poll? Great.
I'll end it.
Yep. All right. So we look forward to your enhanced participation moving forward in the strategies. All right, last slide. For Alicia.
Yes, sorry. I was looking at the poll results. Yeah, let's see, the last slide, let me, I'm kind of tracking you with my speaking notes here. Okay, so in terms of the last 3 types of meetings, we have, as I was saying, the evaluation meeting, and the idea behind the evaluation meeting is really that we are reflecting on whether we're meeting our goals of giving the steering committee more agency in this process, more control over the meetings. And we want the meetings to be more productive and engaging. So you've seen tonight that, there was a survey ahead of the meeting there, and we'll talk about that next, and that there's been some Zoom polls. So we're really trying to encourage steering committee participation as opposed to the, BACMED and EIP kind of like presentation, stand and deliver, and like the passive participation. So we want you all to really actively engage. And then we want to really make sure that we're developing a mutual understanding of the issues. We know that you have a lot of experience to share with us. We have some technical information we can share with you. And so we just want to, you know, kind of like level up with each other so that we're having a mutual understanding of the issues. And we want to engage in problem solving. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure that we keep our vision of, you know, clean air, of, you know, healthy individuals at top of mind, and that we reach it. Okay. And so the next type of meeting will be town hall. As I was saying, it's an opportunity to celebrate, you know, the WOCAP steering committee activities, and to open this, you know, this work up to the broader community. And then the year end progress report, which is a comprehensive assessment of the WOCAP accomplishments, including metrics related to funding and enforcement and partner agency updates. And that's part of the air resources, the state air resources board requirement. So that is the, you know, that's the spectrum of meetings that we have scheduled this year.
Great. Any questions from the steering committee members or other attendees? Awesome. Thanks, Alicia. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Nicole. So we're going to move to the strategy tracking status and review. And Nicole.
Thanks, Randall. I'm going to do a screen share.
Okay.
Give me a sec.
Slideshow.
All right. Okay, so as we move into steering committee advocacy, right? What does that look like, right? And the most basic element of any strategy is making choices, right? And to make this process a little bit easier, I chose 6 advocacy strategies that we could use for 2023. And again, happy to add more, but this is just a basic menu for us to work from, right? So we have a letter of support, and that can be simply writing to, let's say, EBMUD or PG&E or City of Oakland or a foundation even, saying, hey, we're committed to this strategy. And one of the values of doing that is it shows a cohesive and unified approach. Okay. We also have the option of lead staff. And what that looks like is, let's say we're going over strategies and you don't know what tugboat classifications mean, right? I don't, right? And that's when we ask for someone, right, from the agency to meet with steering committee, right, to provide additional information, clarification, and ideally, right, an opportunity for collaboration, right? We also have one of my favorites, right, attending city council meetings or any sort of legislative meetings, simply to make our presence known, right? And we know that things only get done if we're pounding the pavement and demanding, right, demanding from our elected leaders high expectations and high outcomes. We also have ad hoc committees as an option, right? Those are a great option if something is time sensitive, right? So we're talking about the general plan, right? There's quick turnaround for many portions of it. So that could be an ideal situation for an ad hoc committee. We also have attending meetings, right? That could be attending any sort of adoption hearing, right? It was mentioned for the EJ element, when public comment is being asked for, agency meetings, board meetings, right? And for things like that, we're always happy to strategize and come up with key points, right, to mention during these meetings. And the last one is resources, right? So most of these strategies, right, are held by agencies to complete, right? And there's a couple of reasons why strategies might not be moving forward, right? One is financial, right? Another is political, and the third one is functional, right? So if we could figure out the financial portion of that by simply applying for EJ40 funds or finding additional collaborators for those resources, right? That's an approach to move strategies along. Okay, questions about these 6 menu items for advocacy? All right. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I've taken strategies, right, that are in the not started phase, and I'm going to read out the strategy with the update, okay? And you're going to let me know if, right, you want to have influence with the strategy and what that might look like. Okay, so we're going to try this. So we have the Air District, right, proposes new regulations to reduce emission sources from auto body and other coating operations, including the use of vanishing oils and rust inhibitors by 2025. Most recent update from the Air District is priorities for source evaluation and rule development efforts for 2023 include plans to begin additional white paper evaluations. Okay, and then work has not yet begun on white paper evaluation. What, if any, information is needed, first and foremost, for you to understand what the strategy is? And I would love to hear a steering committee voice here. Like, what do you need to know to figure out how you want to advocate for this strategy to move forward? David, I see your hand up, please.
So one of the things would want to know is the inventory of those kinds of sources in West Oakland and in the neighboring in the neighboring neighborhoods.
In general, among the steering committee members, can somebody tell me what vanishing oils are? Anybody want to tell me? Because if you don't know what vanishing oils are, you should be asking, what's a vanishing oil? Because I'm supposed to tell you that this is okay. This is what we're saying. If you all are going to influence this process, you can't sit and listen. You got to say, I don't even understand the question. It's okay. I don't understand the question either. I don't know what a vanishing oil is. How many people are using them? You know, where are they? As David says, how many people use them in West Oakland? Where are they using them? How are they using them? Why does it vanish? What's the,
Yeah.
We can't just sit and look at this stuff, these policy statements that scientists understand or regulators understand and go, oh, I guess that's okay, right? They're doing it. They're doing something.
Brian, I see Rita's hand up.
Great. Good.
Actually, I was going to say something kind of stupid because I thought it was a typo. I thought it was varnishing oils.
It could be, actually.
It could be.
I just Googled it.
I just Googled it, and there's definitely vanishing oils are a thing.
Error.
But,
Yeah.
but
What are they?
It's a manufacturing related oil.
Yeah.
But we don't have no manufacturing in West Oakland.
Hold on, Ms. Margaret. We're not going into there. We're trying to get to where the steering committee will feel empowered to say, I don't know what that is.
Right.
That there's a dozen of you out there. It's like, if you don't know what it is, you better be asking us, because this is your opportunity to better understand. Don't be timid. Don't sit there and go, maybe someone else will talk.
Yeah, and this is a learning opportunity. So either way, I live in West Oakland. I don't want vanishing oils and I don't want varnishing oils, right? So either way, right, we could fight and take up arms there. But again, we need to use our energy in the right way, right? So I brought us back to these advocacy options, right, to keep us on point. Like, oils, period, that we don't need around our kids, we don't need around, right, residents. What are possible ways? What would actually be the best way, right, based on everyone's like time and energy, right, to move this forward, right? So we have letter of support, lead staff, city council meetings, ad hoc committees, attending meetings and resources. And we don't have to answer it right now, but this is what I want us to start thinking about with these strategies, right? Things, if a strategy is not started, it's for a reason. Okay, and we need to start asking these questions as to why, right? It's not started and how, right? We can actually pull levers to move these strategies forward. Okay,
Can I add something real quick?
please.
I think that one of the questions is maybe how many people may need orientation education, what leadership development is, to be able to connect to what the advocacy and this implementation is. We have not had a leadership academy that supports West Oakland steering committee members to be in those ideal situations. And maybe that's one of the questions we need to ask. Do people need that kind of support?
Absolutely, absolutely agree.
I agree.
Okay, maybe this strategy will be more exciting for you guys. Okay. Researchers, Air District will research actions that are potentially exposure reducing. I think we could all be in agreement there. We'll see. Okay, and then it has list of things. An engineering evaluation of exhaust stacks. Okay, a study to determine if smart air filtration systems can reduce exposure. Okay, a study of the potential air quality benefits of a centralized package. Okay, great. The update, right? They're working on this strategy and it's anticipated to begin in 2023. What questions as steering committee members, right, do you have? So this was updated February, maybe 27th of this year. What questions, right, as a steering committee do you have about this update? What do you want to know before you can even think about advocacy?
Well, if you're on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's list, regular announcements, they have a permitting one. And every time I see one of those, there are a whole bunch of diesel backup generators being permitted. And these are really dirty and they don't run very often, but when they do, there's a big exposure to some pretty toxic stuff from those. And so I'm wondering, what the inventory of them actually looks like. And not only, and I'm also kind of interested if there are any and how big they are within the port. Now, these are emergency generators, so they have a safety benefit to them, but it strikes me that knowing more about that cumulative source would be very helpful to knowing what if anything you can do about it.
Thanks, David. What else? What other information would you want, right, to be able to actually comment on what advocacy could look like for you as a steering committee member?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Ms. Owens, please.
One of the things that I would like to know, like the AQ, who do we go to if we have questions? Who's like they may be the point person that we can go to ask a question or get a clarification on a matter, So are so we have partnerships with these people.
Yes.
So how does the steering committee approach, whatever agency we need to find out the information? So like we're working as a steering committee. So it's not like we're just a one-on-one, but something is brought up like within this environment, and we want to bring back information to the group as a whole. So who would we go to for that?
So that's a question.
clear?
Let's answer that right now. Air
Mhm.
District, is there a direct person, right, that a steering committee member could reach out to ask these questions?
Hi, Ms. Alverdia. Thanks for that question. You can certainly start with me, and then often, as I was saying, the Air District has several functions, from permitting industrial activities to policy making and rule development to, planning. And so I might not have the answer at the tip of my tongue, but I can certainly track it down for you.
Okay.
And, if it makes sense at some point, maybe that it would, be worth inviting staff who are working more intimately with these various rules and policy, technical policies to a meeting.
Absolutely, it would help. But since we're here, Alicia,
Hi.
I'd like to pose, is there a list that can be generated where we can say, hey, this person is the one we can maybe put answers to, or maybe email them, or, whatever, to get these answers?
Well, like I said, you can certainly start with me.
Your name, and you're part of this. And even though you're part of the BAQ, you're also integrated into the WOCAP. So we want to know who could I'm saying, I can't speak for we, I'm saying, I think it would be great to have a list that's generated under the specific areas that we're going to be working in, as to who would we go to, and just put it on a list so we can keep that list at our disposal. So we will have to keep going back, well, who is that? Who is that? Just a continuous flowing list. And if there are changes, it can be updated.
I
Yeah, I like
appreciate
that.
that.
Could I
For all the
offer
partner strategies. Yep.
could I offer something here? I think one of the things we're trying to do is activate this committee.
Mhm.
So the committee has a member from every agency that has strategies in the plan. So there's strategies for the city. The city has a member here on our steering committee. There's strategies for Caltrans. Kevin is the representative on the steering committee. So your first place of information is this monthly meeting. We say, I got a question. I don't understand something. I'd like to get information from the port, or from the Air District, or from the city, or from Caltrans, or EBMUD, because they're all members of your own committee. That's really the way to activate this committee. It's to come here with questions and say, there's something I'm wondering about. Can the representative from that agency tell me the answer? So you don't really need a phone list. You've already got them. They're coming.
See, that's what I'm saying. I really wasn't aware that we had a representative in every one of these areas.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? That makes a difference. Knowing that yeah.
It's hard to tell in this format who's actually on the steering committee. That's something we've been trying to figure out. How do we, without shutting out the public, how do we make sure all of you know you're sitting at a table with representatives of all these people? But if you look in the strategies and you see the name of an agency next to a strategy, you can be pretty confident that that agency sits at this table with you. So bring your questions, open conversations, get answers, give your input, and have influence. That's the best way.
Can we take a question? Thanks, Ms. Alverdia. Can we take a question and comment from Alexis?
Sorry, that my question was on the last slide. I don't know if you want kind of individual input about what's confusing. And again, I'm a little confused about what's the difference between a steering committee member and just a resident. I'm just a resident. So do you want comments from us, residents?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So I put in the chat, but essentially, yeah, I find the whole statement quite confusing as someone who's not in this industry and, you know, not technically savvy in a lot of these terms. But I'd also like to understand like the before and after. So they're talking about exposure reducing actions. What is the current exposure, right? Like, I'd like to see the before and after, right? Like, how are we measuring it now?
So
And also
baseline, right?
Yeah, the baseline, and then how that influences health, or how we believe it influences health now. Because again, if we're reducing exposure, but you know, it doesn't improve health, then in my opinion, that's a loss, right? Ultimately, we want a healthy community. So those are just some of my questions. Thank you.
We know that air pollution, right, exposure is a result of policy. And we are in a very unique and fortunate position, right, to actually have, right, agencies at the table, right? And the role of residents, right, and steering committee members, right, is to demand, right, that we have a healthy place to live. And part of this process, right, is figuring out what do clear demands look like? And it starts with simple things like asking questions, right? It starts with understanding, right, baseline data, right? And it also starts with Ms. Margaret's point around we need more community development, so that this language, right, this very technical language of all the strategies becomes accessible and just easier to digest.
And can I suggest that we take one more before we get to our guest?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Please.
We want to make sure that we have time for Richard and Brandon and Brian's presentation.
I had my hand up.
That's Margaret.
One for Alexis, for who on this at this meeting who could give you that information would have been the person for public health. The person for public health can pull up the data and relationship to about exposure, or our person from EDF, Marie Harrison, could pull up the data, or you could contact both of them about the issue of exposure. What is happening, and how we see the next level of reduction. That would be the person to ask that question. To have that direct contact, as what Albertia is saying. I wish that that is, to me, more of a community engagement to identify to those questions that's being posed by people who don't know. Those are the how do we address the answer to the people who could give you the information. So one of the persons on this at this meeting right now who could address the issue of exposure would be Marie Harrison.
Okay, and let's take them in order. We've got Lily, and then Maria has her hand up as well.
Hi, yeah, I would like to add on to Ms. Margaret's comments, and I really appreciate this kind of framework of conversation today, showing how the different entities, agencies, even the federal, Justice 40 type funds feed into a network. So I work for the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. We work very closely with the Air Board. I see my colleague Julia on the line. And so my role is really to help address communities' health concerns of air pollution And given we are a state agency, we work with the Air Board, as I said, to really help implement across, the different communities of the state with the AB 617 designation, health benefits of emission reductions plans. So I don't know how many of you just last week were listening as 2 more communities were added to the list of AB 617 communities across the state. There are now 19. One even, in your neighbor area of Bayview Hunters Point. And so I do hear the community, really prominent concerns about like we are stagnant with funds, and yet at the same time more communities are added. And so what I am trying to say is the health concerns are actually very similar across communities. Not to say that they're all the same, because by all means they're not. But for the kind of prioritization, I use that word loosely, it's probably not the right use, but for trying to figure out sources, that's probably the better. Sources such as ports, or sources such as refineries, or sources such as pesticides. There are other communities throughout the state that have similar and dissimilar sources. And so from that standpoint, understanding pesticides in an agricultural Central Valley type area might be helpful for comparing and contrasting with like another community, perhaps in South Coast, such as Eastern Coachella, which has agricultural pesticide concerns, but also is impacted by the Salton Sea. And so they're similar and dissimilar. And so to that point, West Oakland with its different sources might be comparable to perhaps East Oakland, but we might get also information from, for example, South LA, which has industrial sources as well. So that is where the state kind of view of understanding similarities and dissimilarities is helpful for exposure of communities. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lily. Maria, and then we're going to close with Bridget before we move on to Richard.
Thanks. So I think on this point of exposure, both baseline exposure and how things have changed, that I saw several links to the Owning Our Air report in the chat, and I think there's a lot of great information on baseline in the Owning Our Air report, both measurements and modeling that the Air District did at the outset, and then work of the Health Equity Advisory Committee last year was sort of focused on what are the data sets, both air pollution and health data sets, that the steering committee might be able to use to inform tracking of progress. But I think in addition to the structure we're putting in place for tracking progress on implementation of the strategies, having a more unified discussion about, based on what we know about what data is available, where are we in terms of exposure, and how can we be more systematically bringing together the different data sources that exist to track progress there. So yeah, I agree with the other comments that have been made.
Great, thanks, Maria. Bridget?
Hi, thank you. I want to kind of go back to the conversation about leadership training. And Ms. Margaret, I don't know if what I'm about to say is dissimilar to what you said, but I think more so than leadership, we might need advocacy training, and maybe
I agree.
Okay, and a little bit of organizational training, organizing training, I should say, because I see the steering committee, as you said, as leaders in some of these different areas of taking leadership of that, but also a bit of, for lack of a better term, evangelizing within the community. So for those of us who live, work, whatever within West Oakland, of making sure that our network of people also understand what we're doing and why it's important, so that if and when we need to go before city council or the supervisor or whomever, it's our voices, but maybe even also the voices of other people in the community, because we're using our opportunity to spread the word about the plan why it's important, and explain these terms so people understand how it's impacting their lives. So I would love that training, as you were talked about these terms, other things that we need to know as we're going out in these talking points, so that we can spread the message, and also how we can be effective advocates as we're coming to these meetings and having conversations.
Bridget, can I get your support and developing a committee on doing the Leadership Academy with all those topics and points you just poured out?
Yes, ma'am. I will try my best, and I will lead on my former boss, who is an expert at that. Yes.
Awesome. You've just been voluntold. Thank you, Bridget. Appreciate that. Much appreciated. All right. And that was a great way to close that section out. I did put in the link to today's slides, and you were weighing in on slides 24 to 34. And so there were some additional strategies in there. If you have any thoughts on those, you can take a look at those and then share those by email at a later time.
Well, I think people can type. I'm putting the SurveyMonkey link in. If people have additional thoughts on the strategies, they can just add them to this SurveyMonkey link or email, but everything's all in one place there with the strategies listed.
And we are now going to move, I'm going to hand over the reins to Brandon for Richard and Brian's presentation.
Yes, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. So nice to see everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Richard Sinkoff. I'm the director of the Division of Environmental Programs and Planning here at the Port, and I'm joined by Laura Ariola, who I think is showing, and Laura, of course, you know very well, is on the steering committee. And then our newest colleague at the Port is Brandon Reed. Brandon, do you want to just say one or two things about yourself, just to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, sure thing. So I'm Brandon Reed. I'm very new to the Port, the newest team member for the Environmental Programs and Planning Department, and I'll be supporting on a number of different programs and initiatives across the Port. Not only on the seaport, but on the airport as well. And I look forward to contributing and helping out. And then one last thing is, is that while I've been only a member with the Port for 1 month, I've been a resident of West Oakland for about 10 years now. So yeah, I'm really happy I could join today.
Right, and Brandon has a new baby daughter who's our newest West Oakland resident. So
awesome.
My sense is that he really has a stake in this. Okay, so my understanding is I want to make sure we have some time for discussion and questions. What we'll do this evening is I'm going to present the Year 3 progress report on the Port's 2020 and beyond plan. I may go a little bit fast just so we get some questions, but I just wanted to say as an introduction, a couple of things. One of them is when we developed the plan, and this was done with our air quality task force, which had developed also the previous planning effort, the Maritime Air Quality Improvement Plan. Miss Margaret and Brian were co-chairs. Along with industry was represented by GSC Logistics. And we also had Jack Broadbent and then Greg Nudd, Michael Murphy from the Air District. So the task force worked on the previous planning effort, which was called the Maritime Air Quality Improvement Plan. And then while that was finishing up with the planning horizon of 2020, we moved into planning for the future. We called it the 2020 and beyond plan because the Maritime Air Quality Improvement Plan its planning horizon was to 2020. And to the question that was raised earlier, and I apologize, I didn't catch the person's name, but the previous plan was based upon a 2005 baseline and correlated diesel particulate matter reductions with health risk. So to the question of what's the baseline, what are we comparing against? The state had established a policy early in the early 2000s of targeting diesel particulate matter because of its was a toxic air contaminant connected with respiratory issues and cancer risk. So that's as a way of background. When we did the development of the new plan, again, with the task force, with stakeholder engagement, we were very aware at the time of the important work that was going on with the WOCAP, AB 617. And also another effort was the truck management plan, which is a joint City of Oakland, Port of Oakland plan that arose out of the Oakland Army base. And our concept in all of this planning effort was finally to align them as much as possible. To see where is the alignment, where is the synergy? Because my view as planning director, no single plan can accomplish everything because there are different ways that activities affect, I wouldn't only say community health, but community well-being, community quality of life. So for example, the truck management plan really focused on the impact of the trucks when they move about the neighborhood, when they're making trips in the neighborhood. You're very familiar with the WOCAP. I won't go into that because you designed it. But the 2020 and beyond plan is really focused on continued emission reductions, not only criteria pollutants, but also greenhouse gases. But it's different from the earlier plan, which focused solely on equipment. So I want to go to the next. Brandon, are you pulling up the slides or have you done that?
I should be sharing my screen. Can everybody see that? None. Oh my gosh, I apologize.
Okay, I think you have to do share screen at the bottom. Luckily, we're only on to slide 2. Okay. Let's see
here.
And now
there you go.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Nicely done. Okay. And I'll try to make this as simple as possible. So the difference between the MAQIP, the Maritime Air Quality Improvement Plan, which focused on that top category, equipment. We were really concerned with early actions and regulatory compliance associated with mobile sources. The mobile sources is a state of California rule, a set of rules that target equipment that moves around. So that would be your cranes at the port, your trucks, your cargo handling equipment, the tugboats, anything that's moving by an engine is called a mobile source. And the state regulates that. The Air District, where Alicia is working, and I saw Allison and others, mostly are regulating stationary sources. So there's a difference in the way the Clean Air Act is, responsibilities are delegated to agencies. But the 2020 and beyond plan says this needs to be much more systemic. This needs more a system approach where we're looking at not only equipment, we're looking at funding, stakeholder engagement, partnerships, operations, fuels, and infrastructure. To get to zero emissions, it's going to involve all of these things. And probably the easiest thing for me to understand is if we have zero emissions equipment, if you look at that top category, and you don't have, if you look to the, I guess it's 11 o'clock infrastructure, you don't have the power infrastructure in place, you don't have the electrical power infrastructure or other kinds of infrastructure in place, you're not going to get to that zero emissions because you simply will not have the available sources of power to charge up all of that equipment. And the same thing could be said with fuels, et cetera, et cetera. So this plan is broader in its focus, both in terms of the target emissions and broader in terms of categories. Okay, then what I'd like to do with the rest of the slides is just give you a sense of what's happening in those categories. It's a lot, I can tell you it's a lot of information. We're going to, we've already sent this presentation to West Oakland EIP, or I think to the facilitator. We made this presentation to the board as a year 3 progress report in December, because one of the key techniques that we use, and I'm saying we collectively, the task force members, is to have annual monitoring and reporting out on how we're making progress. So I saw Alicia was talking about that. You know, those periodic check-ins are important. So here's on the equipment, and we have at this stage approximately 44 pieces of near zero and zero pieces of equipment at the port, and many more pieces underway. The ones I'd like to highlight at the very bottom, we have, we're doing supporting a project for a hydrogen fuel cell on-road truck. So we're technology agnostic in our plan. Electrification and battery electric zero emissions equipment is probably the lead. It's the most advanced, but we're trying to keep space in the plan for other technologies as they develop. And you can see here, we've got on-road trucks, we've got different forms of equipment topics. I'll show you some illustrations. Next slide, please. And then I spoke about fueling and charging. So we are starting to construct the charging for the battery electric equipment. So everything that we have right now, we've installed charging stations, and the hydrogen fueling station is supposed to be online in 2023. That's going to be off the port property itself, adjacent to the East Bay Mud facility. We're also implementing public truck charging stations at the Roundhouse. Now that's important because we want to create a site on the port campus where the truckers who are starting to use zero emission equipment can charge, rather than simply it's being a tenant driven concern. And then finally, something that's very exciting, the bottom bullet is mobile shore power outlets. So one of the challenges we've had with the shore power system that we built for $64 million with help from the Air District and the EPA and others is that at times the ships come in, they may be equipped for shore power, but because of the positioning of the ship at the berth, they can't reach the outlet. I mean, all of us have had that problem perhaps at home with our cell phones and things like that. Well, big container ships have the same problem. So we're going to be debuting the first mobile shore power outlets at the port. They're under construction now. Next slide, please. Okay, and this will give you just a visual. We have a lot to show, but WOCAP and the Air District were obviously very instrumental in supporting grants for 13 hybrid electric rubber tire gantry cranes. Those are the second scale of cranes operating on the terminal. You can see a picture here. And in November, we got word that the Air District is going to be funding an additional 3 hybrid electric cranes and another tenant, which is TrayPack. And the port is matching up to $945,000. The cost of each hybrid electric RTG stands for rubber tire gantry, you can see it here, is approximately $900,000. And our third big tenant is talking to the Air District about its funding request. Next slide, please. Okay, here's another type of equipment. This is called a top pick. And we also have installed charging infrastructure for that piece of equipment. So the category here is called cargo handling equipment, and we're beginning to deploy these on a, I would say, on an opportunity basis, and I'll explain the difference later on. Okay, so I see from Nicole, what strategies are these referenced? How do I get a topic? Okay, 2 questions from Nicole. Let me just say that previously, Alicia, and I'm hoping we can do this again, Alicia, we sat down, you did a marvelous job, I think, when you made the report in November, and we correlated all of this to the port assigned strategies. Is that correct in your report that you did in November and December of last year?
Yes. And yeah, we sure did.
Okay, so I think Nicole will do that again. So we thought about trying to match everything, but I wanted to give you more of the visuals and just a sense of the scale of deployment. Next slide, please. Okay, now one of the categories of cargo handling equipment that we believe is ripe now for conversion to zero emissions equipment are the yard tractors. Brian, I have to thank him for being a proponent of this and sort of identifying that this is probably the next most amenable source. So we're working with our technical working group to develop the action plan for the yard tractors. And the idea is that we will, I think someone talked about project delivery and implementation. This is the key where we will set up the targets, the schedule, the budget, and the funding sources for the yard tractors. But currently we have 5 of them to be deployed this summer at Matson. So that will take a big chunk of our cargo handling equipment into zero emissions deployment. Shore power, I'll just touch on this again. This is we consider it to be a very successful program. We see some variability in terms of the ships that call the port. We've had less calls, and at this point, a 62% successful shore power plug-in rate. We would like to get that higher. What happens now, you can see the orange category. Vessels do call the port. They're one-offs. There's a single vessel not regulated, and they don't arrive with shore power. So we're doing everything we can to talk to the lines to get more equipped vessels to call the port. But the key with shore power, as you know, is they shut off the auxiliary engines when they're at port. Next slide. And finally, we're very excited about this project, which is, we've been talking about it for years, a barge-mounted exhaust capture system. Sometimes it's called the bonnet on the barge, where this will be able to capture the emissions from ships that are not equipped. They can pull up alongside the vessel and capture all the emissions. So even if there's no shore power available on board, they'll be able to capture that. And we've been up to Vallejo. The capture and control barge is under construction. This is a photo of it right now. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now let's just turn to infrastructure. This is the power category. We've got 5 substation replacement upgrades underway. We have a new substation that we've constructed at one of the tenants. It's called Shippers Transport Express. That was part of our zero emissions and near zero emissions grant that we did with the Port of Long Beach. So we are rebuilding our power infrastructure system around the port. Next slide, please. And then here's a key. We talked earlier today at the meeting about the Inflation Reduction Act, about all the different grants that are available. The way we describe it at the port right now is it's sort of a tsunami of grants that are coming in, and we're working as hard as we can to develop grant applications. This is something that we have been now talking closely with West Oakland EIP. with Earth Justice, EDF, to identify projects that community projects that can be included in our grants. So I know, Brian, Christy McKenney, our CEO, contacted you today. We have a grant that we're trying to work on now in the next 4 weeks, and we're hoping to get some projects from the community. And if they're sourced from the WOCAP, that would be terrific, because then we would essentially achieve, I would say, compliance with WOCAP and compliance with the 2020 and beyond. And I think we'd have a very successful grant. I won't go through all of this, but there's a lot of money, and you can see that many projects have been awarded, and we have several grants we've submitted them already. Okay, Brandon will have to keep up the pace. So one is, I'm just going to go through these quickly. You'll have the slides. One is the Port Infrastructure Development Program grant. We were awarded 2 of these for $43 million. And they have a lot of green, let's call them that, enhancements such as solar, battery storage, fuel cells, chargers, in addition to upgrades to the terminal itself. Next slide. Another grant is our terminal modernization grant. We just submitted it to the California State Transportation Agency, CalSTA. That went in. I worked on that with several folks at the port. Went in, I think, on January 14th. And next slide, please. Yes, we're going to give you the slide deck. And one of the features of that grant is we also included, both in terms of improvements and preliminary planning, 5 different arterial projects. Arterial meaning the roadways that connect the port to the roadway system in our community. And this goes right to, I think, what Brian was talking about, that we're trying now to lower that, I would say, that wall between the port area and the community. We're all really interconnected. It's a single system of roads, of highways, of stormwater infrastructure, and we've started to include now these kinds of projects, but there are many more that could come from the WOCAP from this group. Next slide, please. Okay, this just describes some of the partnerships we have underway. The Sustainable Ports Collaborative, you're very familiar with, the West Oakland Community Action Plan, the California Hydrogen Hub, but one of them in the next slide I'll show you, which is sort of a favorite of mine. For a long time, there was discussion about creating a vessel speed reduction program within San Francisco Bay. We did a study of that and determined that because of the shoals and the topography of the bay, most of the ships are coming in very slowly, but the Air District has its own program outside the Golden Gate. As you know, we're surrounded by 3 incredibly rich marine sanctuaries, and the shipping lines all cross these sanctuaries, which are rich feeding and migration routes for marine life. I would say biospheres you can't even estimate the value. And so we are helping the California Marine Sanctuaries Foundation support outreach to the shipping lines with a grant, and providing recognition to vessels that participate. And we'd very much like to continue this project and the support. Next slide, please. I think we're okay. Stakeholder engagement. I have talked a lot about these, and you're familiar with this, the technical working group, the Sustainable Port Collaborative. We're working every month. We convene a meeting at the port offices, really to do issue spotting, talk about grants. So we're working on many different, I would say, many different areas. And this is being led by Danny Wan and Christy McKenney, really at the top level. And I would like to say from the board, on behalf of the board is completely committed to a zero emissions port, not only at the seaport, but also at the airport. So this is a corporate-wide commitment. And we have a lot of projects at the airport. Perhaps at the next meeting, Laura, we can present our airport projects, okay? And then I think, and this, I will not, I hope this just sort of illustrates effectively the number of projects that we already have underway. I want to conclude by saying that our board recently, last week on the 23rd, adopted our revised environmental ordinance, which will require all of the tenants at the port to submit zero emissions cargo handling equipment plans by December of this year. And to the question of how is the port doing comprehensive planning, those plans will now allow our electrical engineers and our utilities group and the planning group at the port to look now really comprehensively at all the different equipment proposals and do the analysis for the type of power infrastructure needed to support the next phase of zero emissions deployment. So that is the presentation, and we will, if you haven't gotten already, we'll be sending you this slide deck.
That's incredible.
So any questions?
And actually, before we take any questions, got a little announcement from Brian.
Yes.
And I know you have a hard stop at 5 also, Richard.
Yeah, of course. Just briefly, I want to thank you, Richard, for that briefing. And for those who don't know, Richard has honored us with his last public presentation. He's retiring from the port after 30 years of working in everything, things I didn't even know about, from Middle Harbor Shoreline Park to the airport to all the things we know him for. And he's going to his much deserved next phase of his life where he gets to do fun stuff every day, I hope. And I want to thank him for always being a rational and friendly and welcoming partner in the work we've been doing.
Thank you, Brian. It's really been a privilege working on these projects. And I've learned so much from West Oakland DIP, from you and Miss Margaret, and your dedication has been really a motivation, a source of motivation and a source of inspiration, not only for me, but I think for others at the port. So I look forward to following this incredible work. And if I can be of service in some other way, some other capacity, you know where to find me. If I'm not off the grid in the mountains somewhere, you'll have to wait till I get back.
Awesome.
I hope you get to spend plenty of time off the grid.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Let me make a statement.
Sure.
Richard, you and I, for the last 25 plus years, have had a lot of engagement. In 5 years, you put up with me as a commissioner for the Port of Oakland, and all my grandchildren running in and out of meetings over the years. And so you will be missed, but I think that we have put the stake in the ground on the work that has to be done to make the Port of Oakland better.
Thank you so much, Ms. Margaret. It's been really such a treat, a privilege. And by the way, we had a lot of fun. So to everyone who's on this call, don't forget the joy part and don't forget the fun part, because really good ideas can emerge when you're in that wonderful spirit of collaboration and having a good time. So
we've been to Europe and China together.
We have. Yes.
That's awesome. And even if this is not your last presentation, we're going to claim it as your last presentation.
Thank you, Randolph.
Great. And are there any burning questions for Richard before he signs off from the steering committee? Might be off the hook.
I'm sorry, this is Albertia. Can I make a statement real quickly?
Certainly.
Okay, I had the privilege of going to the conference for the port back in September. And there were questions that I did ask of Danny Wan at that time, because he was a keynote speaker. And I am so pleased to see the things that he did say that were going to happen are already moving along. I'm really happy to see that. And thank you, Richard, for presenting that information. And that's like an update for me for that conference. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Enjoy
Thank
your retirement.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Richard, and congratulations. Happy trails and all the rest of that good stuff.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions on this port section? All right, great. So we're just going to hold you just a few minutes longer. We've just got a couple of items to share with you. So you notice that we've got a different format for this meeting, and this will be the format that we use moving forward. We do have a new business section, and that's really, there's no new business this month, but it's going to be a placeholder where we each month the co-leads can offer information about new items in response to a steering committee request. The co-leads may solicit steering committee feedback or assess an interest in the new items, but it can also be a space for the steering committee members to request future agenda items. So with that, I guess we could ask if any of the steering committee members have any information that they would like shared next month, or items that they want on the agenda. You can let us know now. If not, you can all.
I have one really quickly.
Uh-huh.
That was a survey that was going to be going out that was developed by us, and we all looked at it, but I kind of wanted to add something to it, to that survey. But maybe I could just email you directly, or Randolph or Nicole.
Or Nicole. Uh-huh.
Okay, Nicole. And then I'll find out at that time if it's doable. Okay, thanks. But that'd be part of the new business because I don't know that we have done that survey yet. Is that correct? We haven't done that survey yet.
Well, are you talking about the survey that Nicole emailed out?
Ms. Alberti,
asking me?
can you clarify?
Yeah.
Can you clarify
Okay, the
which survey you're talking about?
Yes. It was pretty much among West Oaklanders and the impact that the environment had on their health. And yeah, that survey. You remember that? Because that was one of the last things we did last year. And it was being compiled, and we were supposed to put input. But when I did finally look at it, it's like, oh, I missed that. So yeah, because there was a couple of things that I did want to ask about. So I'll just talk to Nicole and find out if it kind of just in there.
Yeah, check with Nicole. That may have been something that came from our health equity group.
Yes.
I'm not sure. So check with Nicole and you can get that sorted out. Great.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Great. Also, check the chat. There's a couple of the slide presentation from the port, and also Maria has mounted a HEAC report as well. So take a look at that. And then as an announcement, Miss Margaret.
Yes.
Oh, the ever featured Miss Margaret Gordon is going to be on a panel discussion on reparation proposal called The Reckoning. Do you want to share any information on that?
It's going to be at the library on San Pablo, and I will be speaking. This starts at 7 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, and I don't have a lot of information, but I will be speaking about reparations.
Hold on. So you'll be speaking at 6:30. It starts at 5.
Yeah, 5. I will be somewhere between that time 5 and 7:15 be speaking.
Okay, and
On the
you've
panel.
also, in the slide deck, if you go in that link for State Task Force, that is the report. It's about a 492-page report, but that link is live. And Dr. Javon Scott was on that State Task Force, and he's here at the Othering and Belonging Institute at Cal. Of course, Miss Margaret, and then Cheryl Fabio has actually presented to this steering committee at one time before, when we used to do the presentations before the steering committee, on her film about West Oakland. So that should be a good one. Other than that, make sure if you have any other questions, you can email any one of us, starting with Nicole. And we will kind of be refining our format here, but as has been said, we just really want to make sure that the steering committee and others have more opportunities to engage in this process. So we'll be reaching out to you soon. Let's see here. Any last words from WOCAP?
No, it was a good meeting. I'm
meeting.
glad to have everybody getting engaged and thinking about how they want to influence the process. So, and I really appreciate Richard coming.
Awesome. Once again, congratulations.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing and engaging you all soon.
Good night.
Good night,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.